you're ready, that start is right there.
Hey everybody, we're going to get started in about a minute. If you haven't signed in on the way in, please do so. Let me know who is here. It's on the clip. It's on a printout right over the table as you come in. So if you haven't had a chance to sign in, let me know you're here. It's going to be useful punishment. And we're going to get started in about 1 minute. So also find a seat.
And my one.
Did you hide those things?
There's one leg. I'm not going to probably stop it, right?
We're going to just say,
Want to know more about this?
So it goes back.
I can, yeah.
Okay, I think that's silent. So welcome everybody to the November edition of our Security of Things Meetup. It's been a few months, too many months, unfortunately, and I apologize for that. But one of the problems we were wrestling with, Jeff and I, was finding a good place to meet. Turned out to be harder than we expected. But fortunately, we connected. I connected with my friend Ari, who's been a long time Meetup participant and member, and with Stanley Black and Decker, and got a conversation going about getting them more involved in the Meetup. And they agreed to host tonight, and also to provide the space and so on going forward as a place for us to get together. I think it's a really great coincidence, because Stanley Black and Decker is a company that with a 175-year history. If you think about them for locks, for tools, physical objects that are in our homes, in our workplaces. It's a very familiar brand. Doors, like sliding doors, and they are a company that is totally retooling for future, digital future, software future, internet things future. Actually, this space here is where a lot of that work from the security side to the product development and testing side is happening. Not the only place, but it's where they're doing a lot of their innovative research and real forward-looking plans. So this is a great space for us to get together in as a group that's focused on issues relating to security, privacy, and can't really go to this. So I want to thank them for sponsoring us and working with them and meeting with them. A couple things, if you if you do get your sign in your way, and make sure you sign in your way, I want to know what's coming. I'm going to be circulating a survey for 2019. Jeff and I are really interested in knowing what topics are of interest to you, where you want us to go deeper, what types of things you want to hear more about, or what types of talks you want to see more of, what you maybe want to see less of, and generally just get a sense of where the group is at and what your interests are. And so just keep an eye peeled for that. And Jeff, anything else?
Just good to be back together.
It is good to be back together. We are hoping we're going to be doing these on a monthly cadence. It's not going to be like once every 4 months. December's meeting is squared away. Billy Rios is going to be coming and talking to us remotely. We've got a speaker from Worcester Polytechnic as well, who's a computer science professor. So that's done in the books, and we'll be getting together on December 7th. But without further ado, I'd like to turn over to our main speaker.
Thank you. It's great to have you all here in our features office for Stanley Black & Decker. I know a lot of you were asking questions about how long have you been here? I didn't know Stanley was in Boston. So this office here was opened in July of 2017. And the intent behind it was to create a space that would be a little bit different than your father's tool company, right? As we've been our long history of delivering quality products in the manufacturing space, we knew that we needed to break out and create a space where people could invent and be creative in what they were doing. The Stanley Features office is one of many of those spaces that we've created to really drive our digital transformation into the next century, and we hope to be here for another 175 years, providing everyone with great products. So my team is based both here and in Waltham. The world headquarters is in New Britain, Connecticut, so we're very New England based, but we have global operations in probably over 50 countries, manufacturing in several places up and down the East Coast. We have large offices, most notably in Towson, where the Black & Decker headquarters is, where the Stanley and Black & Decker marriage came to be. Stanley is the 175-year-old company that was in New Britain. Black & Decker was in Towson. So we almost kind of have two headquarters, but they're really two companies now, and the world headquarters is in New Britain, Connecticut. So a little bit of history about us as a company and where we're coming from. A little bit about me before I jump into the next slide here. I'm Julie Fitton. I've been in cybersecurity for as long as I can remember. This is pretty much all I've ever done in my career. About 20 years I've been doing this space. I started off in probably the first 14, 15 years. I was focused in IT security disciplines, worked my way up through the ranks, and eventually went over to the dark side of product while I was at EMC. I went from being in the global IT organization to taking a leadership role for our EMC cloud products and ran the entire security strategy programs for EMC's cloud products, including their certification strategies, and was part of that product team. I joined Stanley Black & Decker a little over a year ago to begin this program, Greenfield. Came in, it was a brand new goal here for Stanley Black & Decker to create a digital product security organization, because we didn't have digital products before. And so this was new ground for the company, and it's been a fantastic journey. A few folks you've met here tonight, David and Ari, are in my team here, as well as another person who's not here, but we're still a small, emerging, developing organization. So we're still in our own early phases of creating what is the next generation of cybersecurity for products. So it's been a lot of fun here. And I apologize for my voice in advance. I'm pretty sure it'll hold up. But if I have to pause for water here or there. This one works. So let me tell you a little bit about what is digital in Stanley Black & Decker. What a lot of people don't know is we have technologies deployed in 14 out of the 15 world's top hospitals. If any of you have had a baby recently or know someone who's had a baby recently and visited them, and you went in and the baby had a little tag around their ankle, Hugs product, Stanley Black & Decker branded product. It's an IoT device that beacons and makes sure that a baby can't be stolen from the hospital. There's exciters that are deployed around the space, and if a baby's taken out the door, the entire hospital goes into lockdown. Ties into the physical security space of the solution, as well as a lot of other products that are integrated into the hospital and clinical settings. None of them are specifically monitoring patient health, though, but they are in the clinical settings. 90% of all cars and light trucks manufactured contain our fasteners. Now I know what you're thinking. Why am I talking about fasteners? What does that have to do with digital products? We would not be able to sell a single fastener if we didn't also sell or deliver with the fasteners a piece of equipment that is installed on your manufacturing floor that places those rivets into the cars and light trucks and applies the welding systems that we sell. So while the product itself, in theory, is not a digital product, it is enabled by a digital component. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to sell these rivets and these products. 500,000 buildings are protected globally. You're sitting here in Stanley Futures Innovations Factory. That's based in providing innovations for our security business. I guarantee you, after you leave here, now knowing that Stanley has a security business, you will start seeing Stanley security trucks all over the place. You've never seen them before, you will start seeing them everywhere you go. They're white or black trucks with yellow lettering or black lettering on them that say Stanley Security. We're a very large provider of physical security solutions, and we have lots and lots of large and small organizations that we sell into. We're an integrator of other people's products primarily, but we do also have a small line of manufactured cameras that we are creating and manufacturing and providing the overlay and analytics components to. 50,000 miles of pipeline deployed. We have an oil and gas division. I didn't know that before I came to work here. Did anyone know we had oil and gas before you came in here tonight? We lease out a large welding device that attaches those big, huge, gigantic pipes together out in the field. And it's a very innovative technology. It can weld from the inside of the pipe, and it ensures weld integrity, so when they roll the pipes into the ground, they don't leak. There's digital technology at play, both for the welding device and capturing the logs of who performed the welds, as well as looking at the integrity of the weld and collecting that data and information to be sure that that weld doesn't have to be cut out and replaced before it's rolled into the pipe. 175,000 criminals apprehended with our security solutions, and thousands of connected tools. Looks familiar, right? Everyone has something like this. Does yours have a little picture of a Bluetooth on it? You can buy Bluetooth connected DeWalt tools now. It does not control the drill. It won't do your chores for you. All your honey-do lists won't automatically get done with the tool by itself. However, for large job sites where theft of tools is a serious problem for large construction sites, these have GPS locators in them, and it reduces theft from job sites. It also allows you, as a homeowner, to put in a setting where your phone has to be within proximity of a tool for it to turn on. So anyone with small children around the home who don't want them to stumble upon a tool and hurt themselves can activate that setting. It's a great capability. Try the drill now. All right, I'll try the drill now. Oh, it doesn't work. Because David has the app on his phone that controls this particular drill. It's low Bluetooth low energy, ETLE in the drill. Communicates with a mobile app. He's got it paired to his phone. We got this one for testing purposes. So David is my architect here.
So what side of the house does that sort of?
That's in our Global Tools and Storage, GTS, which is primarily in Towson. Yeah, that's the old DeWalt was a Black & Decker brand. When we merged together, the DeWalt brand came with it. We also recently purchased Craftsman, so when you're all filling up your garages this Christmas, you'll be supporting our company. All right, so IoT, right? it's not just devices, but certainly devices are a big part of it. So I want to talk a little bit about when I use the term IoT, what is it that I'm thinking about from a technology point of view? I'm thinking about devices, but I'm also thinking about the mobile app that David just used to control the phone, or to control the drill rather, right? These are technology components that are interacting with these devices. They're gathering data, they're controlling the device, they're communicating with it. Some types of gateways, right? Depending on the architecture and the solution, there's all different ways you can manage the connectivity from that device up into the internet. Then you've got your cloud aspects and data rationalization. IoT exists to gather big data effectively. Right? It's not just to control that thing, but it's now for that site manager who wants to keep track of all of his tools to know how many tools does he have? When were the last time they were used? What was the last GPS location of not one tool, but 5,000 tools perhaps? And he's looking at this in aggregate in a dashboard through the data collection that has taken place up into the cloud. We need to secure that too. Right? It's not just about securing the device, that's important, but it's every layer of the technology stack. And then of course you've got the people and the web front ends where people are interacting with the data that's being collected up by the tools. Right? What I don't even have pictured on here is there's a whole nother piece of technology in management planes from the manufacturer who's managing all of those devices, right? How are you getting over-the-air updates? How is the manufacturer able to troubleshoot and provide warranty and support for your device, right? There's a whole other technology stack in the support mechanisms of these devices. So when I think IoT, I'm not just thinking about the drill that's sitting here on the table. I'm thinking about the comprehensive technology stack that's at play and all of the challenges that that introduces. And our program focuses in on providing guidance and governance for the entire technology stack, not just one piece or part of what we're trying to accomplish. So I'm sure that with all of you being IoT Meetup group savvy people, you've all heard of the D-Link in the Dyn attacks that occurred a couple of years ago with the Mirai bot, right? That's not news. But what a lot of people don't realize is the FTC actually sued D-Link for false advertising because they said that their solutions were secure and they weren't secure. This is still pending litigation. It began in January of 2017, I believe, January 2017, and it's going to court again in January of 2019. So this has been ongoing. Very, very expensive for D-Link. Not a really great place to be. We talked about big data a little bit, right? IoT was created to gather big data, right? The D-Link example was an example of a breach of the endpoint or the device. But here's a few where the data, the back end, was actually the target of the breach, right? It wasn't necessarily the device per se in all of these instances, right? Strava's fitness tracking app exposes US military secrets. Through the aggregate information that was collected by all the individual devices that were sold to the military and deployed to people who were located in top secret locations, people were actually able to extrapolate where these top secret locations were. National secrets. Cloud pets. This one's one of my favorite IoT breach stories. As a product manufacturer, it's the one I like to tell my children at bedtime and all of my stakeholders across the company, right? Not just because of what occurred, right? They were able to spy on children, that's terrible and horrible, and we all very protective of our kids. But a really powerful lobby group actually got this product pulled off of store shelves. They got it off of Amazon, Target, and Walmart because of the security flaws inherent in it. That is a commercialization person's worst nightmare, is to have their product pulled from a shelf. No one ever wants that to happen. It wasn't because of regulations. It wasn't because they were sued. It was because a very powerful consumer group was able to convince the retailers to pull it off the shelves. The Teen Safe tracking app exposes data about, again, our children. This was due to a cloud misconfiguration where S3 buckets up in the cloud were left open to the internet and the data was able to be extrapolated and exposed. So as the complexity of this technology stack becomes apparent of how easy it is to reach in different places, it starts to bring the government's attention to this matter. So the NTIA issued a green paper, again, some time ago now, January of 2017, and they called for information, right? They wanted people to submit, what are your concerns around IoT? And they got thousands and thousands of submissions for this green paper. But where they ended up landing was on two areas that have nothing to do with cybersecurity, really, which is interesting, but they're very important topics. Reserving certain frequencies for communicating from emergency responders, right? Imagine if your firemen couldn't communicate with the ambulance drivers in an emergency, in a crisis, because there was no frequencies left for them to communicate on. That would be catastrophe. IPv4 is going to run out of addressable space as we start to connect more and more things to the internet. Catastrophe if you can't get an IP address, right? So I actually think they're focusing on some really good, really huge, big problems here that will fundamentally break the internet if they're not solved for. And it took the president an entire year and a half. Just in October, he issued a presidential memorandum around frequency management and reserving frequencies for emergency responders. So the government doesn't move really fast, even when they're presented with compelling information, right? It takes time to work through those systems. It creates a lot of challenges for us as cybersecurity professionals, and how do we motivate people to do the right things? So we've taken an approach of marketability for our products, right? But we need all of the consumers out there to be demanding these things of our products, and maybe even be willing to pay a couple dollars extra for that Bluetooth drill because it has a cybersecurity seal on it. UL is now certifying network connected devices. Have folks heard of UL before? Few heads shaking yes. Most of you are beneficiaries of UL, even if you didn't know it. Every television that's on a store shelf in the United States has a UL mark on it today. Keeps you from getting electrocuted. So they've been in the device world for a long time. Electrical safety standards, emission safety standards, things of that nature has been their space and their domain. They recognized and saw that cybersecurity was the next very compelling thing around device management that needed to be tackled, and they've now published standards and are certifying devices against their UL cybersecurity certification standard. It's not required to be on store shelves yet. Maybe it will be someday, probably not while this president is in office. He's not necessarily one to feel very compelled to put heavy regulations on industry. So I think it will be some time away, but likely will come at some point. And then our cloud certifications, which are probably fairly familiar to all of you, right? But when you start thinking about cloud security in ISO 27001 and SOC 2, right? Probably a little bit more familiar to people who have been in the industry for a while. But think about the weight and the cost associated with achieving those cybersecurity certifications on a back-end cloud for a product that people will only pay $60 for, right? This isn't Salesforce.com that's getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales and fees, right? Efficiency and effectiveness in our security programs is crucial, or our businesses can't be in the business of connecting devices. They'll never make any money. So it's important to be secure, and it's important to make money, right? Two very important things in product. So we've looked at it through this stack, and we're creating a set of internal standards that align to these industry standards so that depending on where you are in the organization and your skill set, you have very clear understanding and guidance of very specifically what's required in each phase and area. Then our customers are thinking about IoT over here, right? They're thinking about, as an integrator, deploying IoT in their space. How am I going to deploy these things securely? How am I going to do the network segmentation and the configurations? What are the things that are my responsibilities in account management and rotation? And can I tie my industrial floor authentication into my LDAP, right? They're thinking about things as an integrator. We're thinking about things as a manufacturer, but keeping an eye on what the features are that they would need to successfully integrate securely as well. I'm going to skip by this because I don't usually have the actual drill to show people. So but I wanted to spend a few minutes thinking about the trust framework visualized. So our threat actors haven't changed in the space of IoT, right? We still have our criminals, we still have our nation states, our terrorists and hackers, and we still have disruptive events occurring around the world, right? That's not new. Guess what? The tools, tactics, and techniques aren't new either, right? They're still using a lot of the same techniques and capabilities to come after us. But the concepts are a little bit different. They're not always going to be about information anymore, right? I think availability will become a much more crucial aspect of IoT security. Ransomware around availability, right? Think about if someone was able to shut off every drill, Bluetooth drill we've ever sold in the field. It would be a catastrophe, right? We would have to recall all those drills. Would be a very bad day for us, and it would for any manufacturer. So how are we going to protect ourselves? Well, security, right? The devices, the applications, the cloud infrastructure applications need inherent security built in, right? And all the frameworks that are out there, all of your common knowledge and understanding of those things still applies in this field. User access continues to be an important topic and area. Privacy starts to become a lot more interesting and compelling here. Now, we have EULAs and things that we need to communicate with end users who are the consumers of these technologies, right? There's certainly commercial implications for IoT, but there's a lot of consumer-based implications as well. And being able to communicate with those people, right? Say you're a manufacturer and you have a breach of the privacy. How do we know who bought those drinks? They were sold through retail channels, right? So we manage that through registry of warranty and that sort of thing and keep the communications up. But, you know, that's a real challenging problem with IoT is how do you even know who your user base is? How do you communicate with them? It's a real key area of consideration as you're thinking through your strategy for IoT security. Something that people don't always think about. It's easy to focus here, right? We all think about the security. That's kind of how we've all been trained to think. But all these other areas are just as important. And at the top, always present with IoT is ease of use, right? We're selling to grandma. It's got to be easy. When she gets that box and opens it up, it's got to just work. But it's also got to be secure. And here is about transparency and telling people what you're going to do and doing what you say you're going to do, right? Very, very simply. So we talked about the needs for efficiency in the back ends especially, right? These types of spaces, right? Devices and firmware, you know, you can get those down to a fairly marginal rate. You can kind of, you know, they're very low powered. They're not a huge threat vector individually, each individual piece, except for certain use cases. But it's the back end, right? And being able to keep your costs manageable. Lots of different cloud configuration considerations when you're building your architecture in your back end, right? You can build your back end on-prem. You can use a traditional IaaS, you know, Amazon Web Services components that you're all familiar with. PaaS and SaaS don't really come into play here so much, but serverless is a new concept. Anyone in here familiar with serverless architectures? A couple folks have heard of that. So I learned about this when I got here to Stanley Black & Decker. We've got some very interesting, smart, innovative people who introduced me to serverless architectures. And when I saw this for the first time, my jaw, I literally had to pick it up off the floor. And I'll show you why. No OS configurations to manage. Automatic scaling. Deployment takes seconds or minutes. It reduces the development time. Cost. In a serverless architecture, it costs approximately $19 a month to do the same workload that it would take $300 a month in an IaaS architecture. That would cost $30K of capital expenditure and all the costs of running the DC operations to run on-prem. $19, $300, $30,000 plus all your operational overhead costs. That battery dying, that's going on. We're running this off of a flex bolt, by the way. This entire rig is being run off of our battery technology right now, but I didn't realize the beeping meant something. So let me talk a little bit more about serverless, even without the visual aid here. But not only do we see huge efficiency gains, oops, sorry, tech support coming in, but all of the security operations gets outsourced to your cloud provider. They are certifying all of the services that you're building onto. You still need to worry about application security, right? The custom code that you're writing still needs to follow secure practices. You need to be able to be sure SQL injections and things aren't being introduced. But that entire layer of security operations, patch management, scanning and monitoring, you name it, all of the things that you would do in a traditional security operations that you still need to do on an IaaS, by the way, right? You don't alleviate your operational overhead with IaaS. You reduce it some, but it doesn't alleviate it completely. And I got a really great slide next that shows the efficiency gains of serverless costs versus an IaaS cost. There we go. Excellent. So again, these numbers are being used for an example for comparison purposes. Your actual numbers, you can't take the slide and say, oh, Julie told me it was going to cost this, right? I'm just caveating my numbers here, but it's for a relative scale between the two different options. Yeah. So the question is, what does serverless in context explicitly mean, for anyone who wasn't able to hear that? So what that encompasses is there's lots and lots of documentation on the internet so you can get educated on serverless architectures. There's even Wikipedia pages. But in essence, what you're doing is deploying your custom code in a container at AWS that's run and managed by AWS, and it's leveraging services that are like Lambda that are AWS services. So you're literally just calling the service and you pay for each service call that you make. So you have no operating systems, you have no infrastructure whatsoever to manage. And it greatly reduces your overhead, both because you don't have to pay for the operating systems all the time sitting there waiting for requests to come in. You're not paying for that processing time. It literally sits there waiting. When a request comes in, you pay for the processing time spend at the moment the request gets made. So your upscale capabilities are nearly endless, right? So, those Black Friday or Cyber Monday days when your infrastructure is getting maximum hits on capacity, these things automatically scale. You just pay more that month. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to pre-plan. You don't have to plan for the worst case scenario. It automatically scales. So there's lots and lots of benefits to serverless above and beyond the security implications of it. But the security implications as well are extremely compelling, right? So in year one, you'd be looking at about $340K of OpEx and an FTE and a half of resources to deploy common, SOC 2 level security controls on an IaaS. That same server setup serverless would look more like $90K in OpEx. So there's still some things you need to do, right? The cloud configurations, monitoring of those things, user access controls, that still needs to get done, right? So it doesn't eliminate security, but it reduces and outsources that burden tremendously to your cloud provider. And then maintenance costs, continue to mirror that. In the world of IoT, where cost management is crucial, I'm sure looking real hard at serverless, there's going to be a really good reason why I'm not going that way, right? To do it successfully and to do it securely. So let me talk oh, sure, go ahead.
Is there a reason? So is there a what? It sounds like it's all really good.
It's all really good. Some applications, the needs of what they're trying to do don't lend themselves to a serverless architecture. Oftentimes, legacy applications that were built without that very thin mindset have a really hard time porting to a serverless architecture as well. So, well, it sounds great when you have a greenfield and you can design it from scratch and be thinking about it that way. It absolutely should be thinking about it. But if you're going to go and purchase a commercial off-the-shelf product to install and run and manage, it's probably not been written for serverless, right? Even in this room, there was a fraction of a percentage of you who's even heard of serverless yet, right? So, you know, a lot of the vendors aren't familiar with it. It can be difficult to find people with the skill set who can actually build the apps that way and you know how to do it, right? It's emerging for sure. But it is a significant efficiency and effectiveness gain for the future. And I think you'll see a lot more serverless or something that comes along that even leapfrogs that, right? No one out Amazon's Amazon, right? They're always coming up with something new. So, but our program and how do we run and manage this thing, right? So we have a distributed group of engineers, 25 different engineering teams across the company building all of these digital products. They're building them in unique ways because every use case is different. So the technologies are different, the use cases are different, what it is, their architectures are all unique and different, right? But we can build on what we already know, right? We know we want to design stuff securely. We want to get in there and be recommending serverless architectures up front so that they're thinking about the implications and the benefits of those things. Then, when we come up with a really great secure design, we all know that that doesn't always translate into a secure build, right? Compromises get made, a resource doesn't know how to do something that was in the design. So we come back in at the build phase to ensure the intent got translated appropriately into a secure build through testing and architectural reviews and product reviews, launch, right? And then you want to run secure. On an ongoing basis, our customers expect us to be releasing patches on our IoT technologies, right? We have embedded components just like everyone else. 0-day vulnerabilities hit our embedded products as well as our backends. So having processes and programs in place that help us manage and maintain a secure state over time also continue to be an important factor in product security. Then, you know, kind of wrapping around the outside of the core technology and building are those other things we talked about earlier, right? Communications, contracts, crisis management, intellectual property protection, right? Our trade secrets are everything. IoT is very easy to replicate. Cost of, you know, barriers to entry are very, very low. Our intellectual property that we overlay on these things are what makes us different. And protecting that continues to be an important challenge for us. Actively supporting innovation and creative thinking, right? Thinking outside the box, looking at the architectures, not just showing up with a spreadsheet and a checklist, saying these are all the things you need to do, right? Because you might find the next serverless architecture design out there that you hadn't thought of or heard of before. You have to hear and listen to these innovative ideas and adjust your strategy to fit the direction technology is going. Get to the yes while sustaining product cyber quality. Right, figuring out how to do these things in partnership with engineering groups. Make digital security a natural part of achieving MVP. For those of you who don't create product, MVP stands for minimum viable product. Everything you buy on the shelf, if it's the latest, greatest thing, it's coming out bare bones. It's called minimum viable product, right? We want to make sure it's going to be successful and it's going to stick and actually be something that's there. While we may not introduce significantly secure cybersecurity in an MVP style product, we still want to make sure that we're doing the right things, the areas and things that we need to do to be a responsible technology provider, and providing continuous governance over digital product risk. So just a couple of slides here in closing. I talked about the NTIA earlier and their green paper, but there's a lot of different industry groups that are starting to take notice of IoT and the concerns around IoT, and each one brings to the table a little bit different perspective. The Federal Trade Commission, FTC, is concerned about consumers' privacy and security of information, right? They're still the information-centric group, worried about privacy, worried about data, which is, you know, for a lot of us legacy InfoSec people, information still feels comfortable. It's that warm blanket that we know and understand. But you come down here to the Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC, they're not worried about your privacy or your data. They're worried about a toaster catching your house on fire and people dying in a home fire because of a hack of a device in the environment. right? So they've always been worried about making sure products don't harm you. They're starting to recognize that a device that's network connected could be hacked and actually cause physical harm or damage to property. So they're worried about that aspect of IoT and apps and cybersecurity. The Department of Commerce and NIST, well, you know, NIST always stays on top of the latest trends. They're coming out with their frameworks for IoT. National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration for all those wonderful autonomous vehicles that are going to hopefully drive my kids around so I don't have to worry about them drinking and driving ever, right? Wouldn't that be wonderful, right? We can put that all behind us and get rid of the crashed car on the front lawn of the schools at prom time, right? You know, our kids will have safe rides everywhere they go. It sounds wonderful. But we also want to make sure that someone can't hack it. We talked a little bit about UL, Underwriters Laboratory. CE, I can't pronounce the name, especially not with a raspy voice. But CE is the European counterpart to UL. UL is a US-based certification standard. CE has not come out with cybersecurity standards yet, but pretty much whatever UL does, CE does, whatever CE does, UL does eventually. So I suspect some convergence in certification strategies between the two groups to come out. If you want to check out a list of certified products, I've provided a link here. There's only a handful right now. This is very emerging and new. The Industrial Internet of Things is a great consortium that's driving policies, processes, standards for the industry, and the OWASP IoT project, which again, OWASP has always been a great resource out there. There's a lot of really interesting things going on there. Looks like that group has slowed down a little bit as late as far as new contributions to it, but regardless of that slowdown, there's still a lot of really great rich data out there on the OWASP site to check out. So I'll open up to questions. So the question was, is there any divergence that I'm seeing emerging globally? I think the biggest place of divergence I see is in the topic of privacy. I've found, generally speaking, that cybersecurity sort of naturally normalizes and harmonizes because there's only so many ways to protect something and there's only so many threat vectors. So while one framework may cover, 80% of one area and another covers 80% overlap and they've got 20% delta between the two. For the most part, they're fairly common. They're not really conflicting with each other, giving strongly conflicting information or recommendations. But privacy is more of a cultural conversation, right? In Europe, privacy is expected, right? It is part of their culture. They will give up security to retain privacy. In the US, we're a little more reluctant to give up security to maintain privacy, right? We want our law enforcement to be able to get information about a criminal and put them in jail, right? In Europe, they might not be willing to give up that privacy to gain that security benefit, right? So I see divergence in that space a little bit. But at the end of the day, everyone's really trying to do the right thing. It's just more of a cultural preference and difference, but I see a little bit of divergence there. But here, you raise your hand.
I apologize, this is question stuff.
No problem.
What is the use case? Why would I put my tools connected?
Yeah.
That is
Sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
But if you were a contractor that had 1,000 of these on a job site,
Yeah.
and you lost 10% of your tools every month, it would be really nice to have GPS tracking on them. And that's what we give our contractors. So these are GPS beaconing, so that a contractor would know every tool that he purchased where it physically is. So if people are taking them home, he can find that out and fire them. And it also allows you to measure battery life. So again, on a contracting site, right, think about 1,000 of these have to get charged every night, right? But when you're not in contracting, you don't think about these things, but someone has to go around and collect up all of these tools, figure out what the battery life is on them, and make sure they end up on a charging station somewhere, and that what the battery life is, and how long, and do I have parts of my fleet where the battery is depleting more quickly, and do I need to replace that battery? So it's really around maintenance, predictive maintenance, and diversion loss management specifically for the tools. All different use cases, but for the tools, that's the one.
Okay, I have one question. Thank you. Secondly, so I have an internet, put an internet service out of my home.
Yeah.
I live 1,000 miles away. Contract job. And it always worried me. This went through the Honeywell servers, the Honeywell thermostat, and if they ever got hacked, and this air conditioner got put on high, or the heat, something crazy in the house, it could cause a lot of expense. And I guess if I were Honeywell, this would terrify me that somehow I get hacked because I'm responsible for all these millions maybe of households, and I'm the target for sure. And there's just a diversity, there's nation states that maybe are trying to coordinate their head of phase attack, potential people. They just want to teach us a lesson. And just any kind of crazy thing that's really smart high school students. I think there's no one will get that far. How do you, I actually, when I get something that's internet native, I would just prefer to control it with my own port forwarding, my own router, at least I know. And it's really, how do you assure a knowledgeable customer, knowledgeable about what those two are, if you can do the job?
Well, to me, the way that we accomplish that is with certifications. It is the only way to demonstrate to consumers that we have truly done what we're saying we do. And an independent third party has come in and verified that and given us a certification. Just like in the cloud today, right? We look, when we consume a cloud product as IT professionals, right? We look, if it's handling sensitive information or something sensitive, we say, hey, do you have a SOC 2 type 2? Do you have an ISO 27001 certification? How are you handling my data? Right? We ask those questions, but we haven't been educated enough yet in the consumer space to know, to say, hey, if I'm going to trust the security of my house, I want to know that you're doing your job, right? And not every company has a team like we do here, right? And even with a team like we do here, how do you know you can trust us as a consumer, right? You're here tonight, you're hearing from us, and you know who we are, but the person walking up in the store at Lowe's doesn't know who we are and doesn't know that they can trust us. I think really it will be a mindset shift that will need to occur through really media channels, most likely.
Well, that's a good answer. Like when your doctor follows procedures,
right?
Are established. But what that means is it's sort of kicking the can down the road a little bit to, now as consumers, we should really be concerned about what those standards are.
Yes.
Like, I think you could get to the point where I believe you can apply to the standard. That would happen.
It's emerging. It's definitely an emerging space.
Yeah, that seems like that needs to be a dialogue. It's hard to imagine talking about standards.
Well, and I think that's really where, that's why I started off, this is the beginning of the presentation, but I started off the presentation talking about breaches and things that have happened, right? It's going to, unfortunately, most likely take something bad happening to get people's attention. I wish it wasn't that way, but it seems to be the trend with technology is, people go about blissfully ignorant of the risks and what could go wrong until something does. And then all of a sudden they take notice and then the information starts to land with people. Or the regulators step in and start requiring things of the technology providers. But we haven't thankfully had that happen yet, right? We've had some minor incidents and things have happened for sure, but they haven't probably captured public eye to that degree yet.
It's much faster than even understanding.
Right,
That's
absolutely
the problem,
true.
and it always will as it works.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not gonna change.
No, but we could at least be doing some things, right? It might not be perfect. Security is never perfect, right? But moving the ball in the right direction, going in that.
So you mentioned one of the challenges being how to manage your relationship with your customer, given that you're selling a product that has a long lifespan, but isn't one where historically you needed to have ongoing relationship with your customer beyond the warranty or something like that. And in software and consumer electronics, there are many different models. There's this sort of Apple or Microsoft, where you do have kind of a long-term relationship with your customer with software patches and updates and new features and so on. And then, of course, there's a lot of just disposable tech on it. Throw out. So I guess the question would be, first, how does Stanley Black & Decker sort of envision that relationship, 5 or 10 years down the road? Your relationship to your customers, what types of things you're going to need to manage with your products as your smart products out there in the environment, and how you're going to do it.
So I think the revelations are evolving in our product stakeholders in that space. So for anyone who couldn't hear, it was really around lifecycle management and transitioning from being, a provider of a screwdriver that you have a transaction and you walk away to something where you have an ongoing relationship with your customer is a pretty big transformation mindset for a company to go through. And we are going through that exact mindset shift right now for sure. A lot of our firmware developers and engineers come from a background of mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, right?